Hello, everybody. This is Gene, and this is a new episode of Mediums, Messages, and More. Today, I thought we would take a look at advertising your brand without advertising. And what I mean by that is several projects that I've recently been involved with and have completed were with organizations that were having some anxiety over the fact that they didn't have the resources that they wanted to do traditional advertising. And traditional advertising meaning they wanted to take display ads or even quarter page ads in either digital editions of newspapers, trade magazines, or even do banner ads on websites. But they found that they didn't have the either the capital resources to devote to that, or internally there was a lot of debate and disagreement on whether it was worth it. And so I just wanted to focus today on speaking to those organizations. And to me, from what I've seen lately, uh, that might be the majority, the overwhelming majority of businesses or organizations today that are really finding themselves in a predicament where they feel like they've hit their ceiling on what they can do in the marketing sense to get their brand out and all of the things concerning their brand, yet they don't have the visibility that they want. And and so advertising typically comes up, and advertising, of course, is a long held tradition in marketing departments to get that brand visibility. Now, marketing and advertising is very expensive, and even on scale, um, even for the largest companies, marketing and advertising, from my experience, is always a bit of a thorny issue when it comes to budgets and budget time, because it costs a lot of money. First, on the creative side, if you're going to do advertising in house, then of course you need a department. You need an apparatus internally, and that includes creatives, people that have the creative background and the creative thinking to come up with copy, to come up with visuals, a campaign, branding attributes, and all of that. So internally, a lot of organizations have have over the years moved away from trying to do that internally, and they outsource it. Now, I can speak from personal experience working at several public relations and marketing firms over the years that it isn't necessarily less expensive to outsource your advertising and your marketing, um, but it depends on what your goals are. And so, what I mean by that is, if you are going to go in on an advertising campaign, it could very well be less expensive and more efficient to outsource it, because a marketing firm, an advertising firm, agency has all of that apparatus in place already. And they have the experience, and they also have the relationships um, with other vendors who might do some of their design work if they don't do it entirely in house. And there's that whole other part of this called, the media buying, which a lot of organizations are not aware of. That if you do employ a marketing advertising firm, often, especially the very well established ones, which of course are more expensive, they have media buyers, and those media buyers have relationships with either the middlemen who are buying advertising from media outlets or directly with the media organizations themselves. To try to do that independently, you could definitely do that more today, and you could definitely do it less expensively than in the past. But primarily, the problem is time and the investment that needs to be made on the staff level, and the time that's taken to build an infrastructure for that. So, that being said, I've found that a lot of organizations today are coming to a point where they are either being outpriced for advertising in general, or digital advertising is now becoming what print advertising was. Now, my background, my roots are in journalism and being a newspaper reporter. And my earliest work was working for a daily newspaper. And I would often look at that day's edition and see full page ads. And back in the day, when newspapers were really still king of the hill, you could have the first section of a newspaper be, I don't know, 50 pages, 60 pages, and half of that on a Wednesday, let's say. Wednesday were big advertising days. Wednesdays and Thursdays were big advertising days. Half of that section would be print ads. And a print ad could easily cost you 25, $30,000, $40,000. Today, a full page ad in a large daily newspaper costs more than that. And the question was always, was it worth it? How many people sifting through a printed newspaper on the bus, on the train, on the way home, on the way to work, are looking at that ad? Well, advertising today digitally is kind of having the same conundrum now, where click throughs and organic impressions are being questioned more than ever. The fact that there are a lot of sensitivity issues where digital advertising for an organization could be on a page or next to content that it doesn't want to be associated with. So digital advertising is now dealing with its own issues, and there's a lot of anxiety on the advertiser's side regarding that. So, generally speaking, if you don't have the resources yet, or you're just not comfortable dedicating tens of thousands of dollars, which is really at a minimum what you should be dedicating to a long-term branded campaign, because a fly-by-night campaign isn't going to work. Only and I'm sure there's a lot of people who they strive for. They want that classic viral campaign where it costs almost nothing and it becomes a viral sensation. Well, let's get to reality and realize that does not happen very often. And when it does happen, you typically find out that there was actually a lot more behind it, a lot more money behind it than what it first appeared. So let's look at advertising the brand without advertising in the traditional sense. And what I have been speaking with clients and having discussions with colleagues over the last several months, uh, I feel more, I feel stronger than I have previously, that really in 2025 and in this digital world that we're living in, and with social media and the continued digital transformation of legacy media to streaming, and everything's just moving off your linear television, off print. I'm really buying in to the fact that the best thing long term that an organization can do is to become its own media source. become its own production of content, become its own destination for content to distribute. And it really, really makes a lot of sense today because as we just discussed, advertising has a lot of questions today, and it has a lot of downside to it today, especially in the social media world that we live in today, across all platforms. The biggest ones included. Is advertising really delivering for you? Um, Traditional media, legacy media is basically out of reach for most organizations today. And they don't have the resources or the time to really invest in a long campaign that is traditionally media based. They need results quicker than that, and they need it done more efficiently and less expensively, right? So creating creating a media apparatus internally is really one of the best investments that an organization can make. It is a smart investment. And what I mean by that is, you can advertise the brand in so many ways without an ad. And there's so many different directions you can go in. So let's start with media relations, creating a media relations apparatus internally. And a media relations apparatus should, at its base, recognize that its goal is to promote the organization, to promote its messaging, to raise its visibility, and to support the brand. Now, there's a difference between a media relations program and advertising or marketing and sales. They're all in the same boat. They all have the same or should have the same goals. But if you're going to develop and create a media program or a media department, and some folks call it external communications. I've just finished a project where everything that we're talking about today went under the umbrella of external communications, which I think is great. I think that's uh, actually more accurate than media relations. External communications involves a lot of things, but it's also, in the end, it's publicizing the organization. So with media relations, start thinking about creating content that is usable by media that is relevant to your organization. And probably the starting place is, think of trade media. Whatever industry that your organization may be in, there most likely is at least several media outlets. And when I say media outlets, they could be podcasts, they could be blogs, they could be traditional magazines, they could be newsletters. And uh, think about creating content that speaks to those industry trade media outlets that are relevant for your organization. And one of the best things that an organization can do, and I see so many waste the opportunity, is to look inward. And more organizations, in my opinion, need to look at themselves as sources for content. And I don't mean promotional content. That's a totally different category. Media should not be confused with marketing. Um, Pitching journalists and writers and news outlets should not be confused with advertising. Now, you're both are publicizing the brand, both are trying to raise visibility, but there are different ways to do it. But if if an executive looks inward and they see their organization and they see that they have ideally they have an infrastructure in place where there are different employees in charge of different areas of the company, and especially if you are in manufacturing, or even if you're in consulting services or financial, it doesn't really matter what your organization does. You have people who are practicing this every day. And ideally, you have some veterans, you have some folks that have years of experience and they've built credibility, and they can share a lot of different types of stories, successes, and even pain points of getting to those successes that make the company human. A problem that I see some organizations create for themselves is they all want to be perfect. Like, we never had a failed research and development issue. We never had a failed pitch to a potential client. We never lost a client. Well, we don't want to talk about it if we did. Um, we never we never realized that um, we were losing money or wasting money by doing things a certain way until we realized we could do it better. Humanize your organization too. And so in general, think inwardly to go outwardly. And if an organization creates internally its own communications, media, content apparatus, you're really ahead of the game, because a lot of organizations don't do it. And a lot of organizations outsource it. And outsourcing isn't as simple as it seems. I've been there, I've done it, I've been on both sides. I've worked and led departments for organizations that outsourced, and I was working at agencies where I was the account director. And one of the evergreen issues on outsourcing things like media relations, content creation, is until you really have a solid relationship built between the agency team and those at the client, where you're almost in sync and you can read each other's mind, and you know the quirks of each other, and you know the tastes and the words that would be used and the words that wouldn't be used, and the style. This takes time. If you do it in-house, well, ideally, you know what your culture is. You know what your voice is or what you want it to be. You know what you want your brand to represent. You know what you want your brand messaging to convey and not to convey. You know what your style is for the organization, whether it's conservative or it's down the middle or it's very liberal and progressive, if it's stylish, if it's quieter. You know that. So if you build internally a department, an apparatus that is creating content, well, the company owns that content. It's your content. And you can create that and then pitch it to relevant media that is important to you. You can also very easily take that content and do the next best thing, which is place it on your website. A fundamental shift is occurring in business today as it relates to media and sales and even marketing, where people are going to organizations' websites to learn more about the company, not even necessarily to purchase something yet, but to, at the very least, start getting an initial feel for the culture of the company, what it represents, its history, its story, its journey to where it is today. So people are going and using company websites to really do research on what the company is and who are your leaders and what are their accomplishments and what has the company done. And one of the best things that an organization that doesn't have the resources to go to big media, to do long-term advertising campaigns, to pay for influencers and all that stuff, one of the best things that you can do is to create your own media communications department and start becoming internally a factory of manufacturing content. And on one hand, you can deliver it to relevant media, and you could start creating a media relations program and start building media relationships and getting placed into media that is relevant to you in an earned media way, meaning you're not paying for it. You're not paying for the placement of it. You're earning that media. But also, you could store all of that internal knowledge, all of that internal subject matter expertise, your white papers, your case studies, opinions. Now, I know, and I've said this over the years, and the organizations that listened to me have done very well. I usually get to a moment within an organization, whether it's a client or I'm in house, where I wind up having this very discussion. And one of the things that I advocate and have advocated for a long time is the company can only benefit by raising its visibility in a controlled manner. So if you're hesitant, you're anxious in going to media, and you certainly don't want to pay for it, and you don't have the wherewithal, or you're not interested in doing earned media, well, then at the very least, create just as much content as if it was for media relations and place it on your website. And part of that should be opinion. An opinion doesn't have to be controversial. Opinion doesn't have to mean that you speak on everything under the sun. Opinion doesn't have to mean that you have to gaslight or you have to have a soundbite. A steady, consistent, legitimate, reliable, professional approach to creating content will, ironically, eventually get the attention of the audiences you want to attract, including media, including potential customers. So I strongly advocate that. Think about creating your own communications slash media department, and think of yourself, think of your organization as a content factory. You have the people in place. You have the experience in place. You have people who are your subject matter experts leading different divisions and units of your company. You have the history of failures and wins. You have the history of building product, building the company, customer successes. You have all of this. You certainly have opinions on things. You can do outlooks. You can do insightful white papers. There's a lot of things that you can do today that are easier to do than they were 20 years ago that you can control. So that would be my starting point. One thing that has come up recently in meetings that I've been in related to all of this is artificial intelligence. Well, wouldn't it be cheaper to create advertising and to create content using AI internally? And here's my 1.0 macro outlook on AI right now. My gut tells me from everything that I've seen so far that artificial intelligence in everyday business. artificial intelligence in the everyday operations of an organization and the management of it, and creatively. AI, to me, from what I've seen so far, is falling short. Where I see artificial intelligence really coming into play are things that are already automated for the most part, and things that can be automated. Whether you're dealing with databases, you're dealing with programming, right? You're dealing with maybe coding, right? There's a lot of things. Think in terms of paperwork and data, right? And processes that I think AI is proving that it can make more efficient, not necessarily be completely 100% reliant on. But what I've also seen is on the actual management side of things, on the creative side of things, and that includes writing, design, editing, research. AI is not doing it. And I think we're in this period where businesses are still kind of on the front end of experimenting on how far can they take AI within their organization. But I've seen just over the last 3 or 4 months that AI has a lot of real world limitations when it comes to things that are people based. And that includes thinking, that includes creativity, that includes everything from editing and writing and research and composing and designing. A lot of AI exclusively produced content that was given to me to look at, whether it was written, it was video, it was audio, it was graphic, I could see immediately that it was AI. There were mistakes everywhere. So I think there's this temptation to equate artificial intelligence equaling saving money. I don't see that yet, honestly. I really don't see that in a large portion of business operations. I don't see that. I do see that on the technical side, on the process side, on things that are already automated or halfway automated. I do see that. So I would be careful with investing time and energy into the creative side for AI. It can definitely, I think, help. But I got to be honest here. I've had a couple of people say to me, "Well, we can employ artificial intelligence to help our writers, to help our salespeople, our marketing folks create." And I don't mean any disrespect by this, but those people should be creative by nature, in my opinion. And AI shouldn't be a crutch. AI shouldn't be something that props those people up. AI should be something like a dictionary or a thesaurus, that helps them maybe think of another way to do something, or expand the ideas, but not to actually execute it, because I just haven't seen quality behind it. So I know and maybe one day it will get there, but right now I don't see saying, okay, let's create an internal advertising department, or let's create an internal media relations department, or let's create an internal AI sales department, and just go all in on AI. Because I haven't seen it work. I have not seen it work. I've seen the materials that I've seen, and then maybe it could just be the samples that I've seen, but I've talked to others and they say the same thing. For those things that I'm talking about, AI is not perfect. It's far from perfect. And it's actually a little dangerous, because if you're relying on it to do your research, basically to do your thinking, to do your creativity. AI is only as good as what has been programmed into it. AI is only as good as how it was built from its source material. And I've seen everything from misspellings to sentences that made absolutely no sense to graphic design that really had nothing to do with what was the goal come out of it. So maybe not right now. If you want to use AI as a support mechanism, as a research tool, go for it. I think it can help. But to go all in, especially if you're a smaller organization, I fear you're going to cause yourself more problems and headaches and waste of money and time right now, anyway. So, going back to advertising the brand without advertising, um, let's also look at other things that a brand can do. Now, one of the things that I've advocated for years is a brand that really is looking to raise its visibility should take the concept that I've just discussed about building an internal apparatus for communications and media and take that content and brand it, but brand it in a method that is something that becomes routine. And what I mean by that is one of the best and easiest examples to relay this idea are polling. There are so many colleges and universities, as well as now for profit businesses across different industries that now have their own branded think tank arm, if you will, internally. And they will come out with a quarterly report on whatever it is that is relevant to them, but it's branded and it's their branded report. And it includes research, it includes data, and it includes opinion. It's a brilliant thing to do. And over the years, I've advised clients to do this, and they've listened. Those that have listened did very, very well with it because it is something that is multi purposed. Plus, relatively speaking, it's very inexpensive. So, to take my original premise of creating a internal communications apparatus, imagine your organization also building, whether it's quarterly or it's annual, a report or a poll, a piece of research that comes out that's branded, that's yours, that you can place on your website and people will find it. You can give to media and it's a legitimate source of data and research. You could give it to your customers. You could give it to clientele, potential clientele. You can hand it out at events and trade shows. There's so much you can do with that. But what does it do in general? It's an inexpensive way to get your brand onto something that you own, that you're a subject matter expert in, that over time can become a consistent, reliable piece of content. So I would strongly urge doing that. It's really one of the most effective ways to use your brand in an inexpensive way and in a way that you can control the content and you can get the visibility long term without having to overpay for it. Community relations. Community relations is one of those things that, if executed well, can have a lot of great return for your organization. And think about organizations. In my mind right now, I'm thinking about sports teams. Have you ever watched a Have you ever watched a ball game where you'll see a video clip, or you might even see it online, and not even during the ball game, representatives of the team come out onto the field with one of those giant checks, and they're presenting it to a community organization, a nonprofit, and it's on the face of it, it's a photo op, right? But it's a lot more than that. It represents something that was important to the organization. It represents outreach. It represents goodwill. It also once again humanizes your organization. And that's very important today. There's a growing disconnect, ironically, with all of the technology that we have and the 24/7 culture that we live in with cell phones and uh, websites and digital media and texting, and messaging. Yet, a lot of consumers, uh, from research that I've been reading, feel more disconnected than ever from brands that they like. Never mind brands that they don't know anything about. And people, whether they are just a customer that is just outright purchasing your product or service, or they could be a potential business partner or a large institutional client. People want to feel that they know your brand. Most people want to feel that they are supporting a brand that they could feel good about supporting. And to do something like community relations and investing a certain percentage of money that you have to distribute, it's not even the amount of money, because certainly a lot of nonprofits would understand, if you're a smaller organization, or even if you're not, that you just have only so much bandwidth as far as what you can give out. But something is better than nothing. And the fact that you do this really sets up externally a relationship building process. By the way, internally, I can't tell you how many times I have spoken to people, uh, working at an organization, who were either very happy that they worked for a company that had values that relayed itself into, they donated to organizations, they donated to causes, they felt good working there. It was one of the reasons why they wanted to stay there, even if what they felt their work life, their work world wasn't great, and they weren't happy with their job. They were happy being at a company that they knew was making a difference, trying to make a difference, and stood for something. On the flip side of that, I also had very many people over the years come to me at different organizations and share their frustration that, their organization didn't stand for anything. It seemingly didn't have any interest in helping the community, or helping a cause, or supporting their own employees, and helping them in their fundraising efforts. So, something to think about that also is cost effective. Now, brand ambassadors. One of the things that I've had a lot of discussion about lately with people is the role of so-called social media and brand ambassadors. And let's take on social media right now. Um, I think generally speaking, social media, and I'm not singling out any individual platform. I mean all of them. Social media is something that I think you really need to be careful about, especially if you are a small or organization that hasn't done a lot of advertising or marketing. Because social media today, and listen, social media produces a lot of good. Social media can be very productive. It can connect people. It can help causes. It can help communities. There's a lot of good with it. But there's also for the business world, there's a lot of downside. And that includes, the toxic culture of people attacking one another, of let's say there's some bad news on any particular day, and so that social media platform's feed is going to be inundated with people attacking one another, or people just posting propaganda from any side, or more darker, more vitriolic content that is nasty, that you don't want to be any part of, right? So I would say right now, my opinion on social media is, if you're going to or you're interested in using social media, I would, particularly at this moment, keep it very contained. I would identify the 2 to 3 social media outlets that are most relevant for you as it relates to your target audience. And then I would stay self-contained. I would post content that stays within the messaging of the brand, that of course is promotional, because I think most people would understand that is a promotional tool. And I would definitely stay away from going outside the boundaries of promoting a brand, promoting a service or a product, placing an ad, reposting an ad, or what I personally kind of tend to advocate for is, how earlier I was talking about creating internally a factory for content, and that includes white papers, research papers, thought pieces, case studies, right? Well, use social media to promote those things and guide people to your website. And of course, it shouldn't have to be said, but for the record, don't engage, don't engage outside of that, and don't get involved. Don't involve the brand in anything outside of using social media for your messaging, because I think it's a no-win game right now, and you wind up causing more headaches than you do positive progress. That's just my take on that. Circling back to brand ambassadors, a discussion that I've had over the last month, especially, has been, if a CEO doesn't want to be a brand ambassador, what do you do? And my starting point today is, whether you are a small business and you have 20 employees, or you're a medium-sized business with 500 employees, or you're a large conglomerate, CEOs today, in my opinion, really, ideally, should be the primary voice and face of the company. And the CEO really should be the person who is the leading brand ambassador. And that, again, doesn't have to mean that a CEO comments on everything under the sun, or anything outside of the relevancy of the business. But it could mean offering a thought piece. It could mean doing a videotaped interview and placing it on the company website. It could mean doing a podcast. It could mean doing an in-house created Q&A on a particular topic. There's a lot of things that can be done utilizing the CEO to amplify the company's voice and to raise the visibility that is, relatively speaking, safe and should be done. Again, unless you have the resources and you have the time, even large brand companies aren't an automatic that they're going to get their CEO on a particular show or they're going to secure an interview. Doesn't doesn't happen that way. It's only for the very, very largest and most influential companies. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the CEO. It has to do with the organization often. Uh, that a large, big media wants that name drop. They want that brand to drop. So that's why they use them. But a CEO, in my opinion, really should be the brand ambassador at the top, really should be out there, going to events, going to trade shows, doing speaking opportunities, delivering keynotes. And that's pretty traditional stuff. What I would add to that today is the CEO should be accessible to the general public through internally created interviews, internally created podcasts, internally created video. And that way, you are, once again, you're humanizing the company. You're putting a face to it. You're putting a character behind it. And you're starting at the top. Where I think companies go wrong is they stop there, though. If they do embrace the idea of the CEO should be the primary brand ambassador, too often they stop there and no one else can say a word. And that's, again, going back to my original point in this episode, is you're wasting so much potential content and talent and insight that you're paying for as an organization. You have all of these people, use them, but use them intelligently. Use their expertise, use their subject matter expertise, use their insight and their experience intelligently to support the CEO, to support the brand. Depending on whatever your organization does, I would think there has to be people that are subject matter experts in particular fields, particular tracks. Get them out there and do the same thing with them. Internally created interviews, internally created thought pieces, internally created audio and video segments. You can control it. It's far less expensive to do it yourself. And you are becoming a content factory that media will ultimately start to see. They'll start to find, they'll get to know you more. And also, your potential clients, your existing customers can build relationships with you. So, I'm going to leave it there for this episode. There's so much more to talk about when it comes to external communications and executive communications. We'll get to those in another episode, but just wanted to touch on advertising the brand without advertising today to get the ball rolling, and we'll be following up in next episodes on this topic, and we'll expand out of there. This is Gene King for Mediums, Messages, and More. Hope you enjoy the program. Be sure to check out our archive for previous episodes and go to genekinglive.com for more different types of content, including the newsletter and articles. And I will see and talk to you soon. Bye.